the discussion forum, in the focus groups, people said, we want a safe place to talk, that kind of thing. And so we actually did do a moderated discussion forum, and that doesn't really work. Interestingly, I think it goes with a lot of the literature. I think it's about since 2007, 2008, moderated forums have been in decline each year since then. And the lack of participation, I honestly had to beg people to participate in the forums, just shows that maybe that isn't quite exactly what they're looking for. Even though people said, I want a safe space, the fact that we use Discus, so you have to sign up, and it takes 2 minutes to become a participant. But still, that was a barrier, and so people haven't been using the forums very much. We do have, one of the things that we decided that they were going to videotape or tape the town hall meeting, which was going to run 2 hours in Vancouver. And I said, since you have the video people here, and I don't think people are going to really look at the whole 2 hour, conversation town hall all the time. So we made 8 short video clips talking about LGBT issues for seniors. And we talked about like stigma and aging and things like that. And so we produced 8 short videos, probably 3 to 5 or 6 minutes. And then these have been viewed 1,100 plus times since we launched the site in March. So I felt pretty positive about that, how that worked out. So we can go to the next one. So this is the site, even though it was supposed to be, from the grant point of view, the site was supposed to be a pilot project for just British Columbia. And as often happens, things morph out of control a bit, and we ended up putting resource inventories from all of the provinces, or from the five participating cities on here. And so it got a little bit more extensive than we wanted to. The one problem with this is that we could keep the BC going because I committed to being webmaster there till till 2019. But in the other sites, I don't have people there who are continuing on, so we won't be able to update the other inventories. But it has been a lot of positive feedback on the website. And at first I thought we had a lot of users till I learned how to analyze Google Analytics a bit better. But you see those things, you're like, oh wow, there's like 1,200 users, 1,500 page views. But then I looked at the other data, and I find that we have around maybe 120 to 140 users a month, which I felt was pretty good given that end-of-life conversations is sort of a narrow area, and it's also for a smaller group of people, LGBT community. And I guess we'll go to the next one. Oh yes, my research interests. So in a nutshell, LGBTQ rural aging. I found that most research is urban-centric, urban-centered. I've done a couple different reviews of the literature, and you have there's quite a lot. There's tons of literature on LGBTQ, and there's a lot of literature on aging, and there's a lot of literature on LGBTQ aging even in urban areas. As soon as you add rural into the mix and small town, there's a lot that's unknown, a lot that's understudied. So I think I have tangents I can go on with the research. Right now I'm kind of focused on, we looked at doing something to continue end of life in rural, which should be good. At the moment I've been doing sort of a background for the lived experience of LGBT, probably focused, depending on funding, be just like either just gay men or maybe gay and lesbian, and focusing on their experience living in a rural community. And I want to focus on the joys and challenges of living in a rural community. I don't want to focus on, I don't like the idea of making something into a problem, because aging, for example, is not a problem. It's something that happens to all of us. So instead of focusing on what are the challenges, what's wrong, I also want to focus on what's right, what's great about this, and how can we get more of this. And so that's why I want to do both the joys and challenges. I think the particular cohort I'm interested in, 60 plus, I'm kind of fascinated because these people grew up in a time when being gay and lesbian, homosexual was illegal for a lot of their lives. It was considered a psychiatric illness for a lot of their lives. And having grown up and sort of come of age in that time period, I think they have a great story to tell. They have a perspective I want to know about. And I think it's also something we have to capture because, you know, years down the road, these people who grew up at this time and came of age, you know, they're not going to be here. It's the, you know, a new cohort's going to come along. So we'll do next. So the importance of recognizing diversity. First of all, you can see that it's actually hard to get a diverse set of pictures. If you go to Shutterstock and you look for LGBTQ, you find the same people over. And as soon as you put aging in there, it's like these 4 models. That's it. You know, it's just quite funny. So it's kind of limited the photos I can do. And they're not as diverse as I'd like them to be. One thing about diversity, I think we often think about diversity. We think about society as a general heterosexual society, and we think of diversity of like saying accepting LGBT people, accepting people of different religions, and all these things. And for me, I also think it's important to focus on the diversity within the LGBT community. And I think it's very important because for me, I remember, say, about 20 years ago-ish, I hated labels anyway, but I sort of forced myself into it. And I went under the bisexual label, and then this is weird. This is a community, LGBTQ, right? But I experienced a lot of biphobia from gay men by saying I was a bisexual person. So as the years went along, actually twice in my life, I came out as a gay man. I said, oh, yes, I'm gay, this, that. I said this in your workplace, different places, things like that. And so you know what happened? Both times I came out, I actually had a girlfriend 6 months later. It just turned out that way. And so made this idea of labels, which I don't like any, but if I had to say what a bisexual label is, it meant to me, if you're single, I don't know who I'm going to love next. I don't know who I'm going to be in a relationship with next. That's all it means to me. And so, but it was kind of funny to be, you know, part of those letters, but be the B letter and have this biphobia. And so that was a bit tough. Then another area that I found out, and this is where I think we have to be inclusive of everybody, is that, like I said, my name is Robert Berenger as well. I like being called the Berengers. I like being married. And however, in the gay community, I've also had some lashing back from people who, there's a large segment of the community that does not believe in heteronormative behaviors. They don't believe in gay marriage. They don't want this. They say, just be a gay person. You don't have to be married. You don't need this. And I feel like, well, for me, this is what I like. And I think it's fine, and I like to respect your opinion. So for closing, I would just like to say that in diversity, I think we have to recognize the diversity within the LGBTQIA2 spirit. You know, everybody has a voice, and I think everybody needs to be heard. Thanks. There's one more slide.
Oh, thank you, Robert. So in the, we're running a little behind schedule, so I'm just going to jump to the bringing up Jackie, who spoke earlier, to facilitate a conversation and open this up to the floor.
Okay, so let's. Thank you, Kevin. Oh, I got a mic. I was moving around too much. It's not on. Do I need to do something? Can you hear me? All right. I was moving around too much, so now I've got a microphone. So, great morning. Yes. Thank you to everybody. So really, this is your dialogue. This is your discussion. This is a place where we can at least start the conversation, start to educate ourselves. One of the things I tell the kids, so I'll let this sit with you for a minute. I have a 19-year-old, an 18-year-old, and a 9-month-old. that's a diverse family. So as my son is coming home from rushing because it's Greek week, I'm getting up to nurse the baby. So that's how we talk. So one of the things I say to them is, you have to be able to be open, to have a conversation and not to shut down. So I can't tell you how many times I've heard, what does your husband do? My wife does this, right? Or I took my wife's name. I think, Robert, to your point, and all the feminists within the lesbian arena just about choked me. But I like that. I like to be able to say, we're the Scales and this is our life and this is what we do. So what I say to them is it's about conversation, and it's about opening, and it's about asking, and it's about learning, and sometimes that's tough and it's hard. And often, and I've done it myself, so in the inclusion and diversity space, I go across all of the different groups. And so when I agreed, for example, to take on the co-chair role for the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario for our First Nations and Aboriginals peoples, I had a lot of learning to do. I stuck my foot in my mouth a number of times. But what it is about is it's about doing it, acknowledging you did it, and then standing there and saying, help me understand, help me learn, help me figure that out. And that will go miles in building trust and building an open environment. So here's our platform to start having that discussion. Is there any, maybe we can start with any questions from this morning, or just questions in general, or whatever pops into your head around diversity? Yep. A loaded question to start with for anyone in there. It is, yep. So for those on the line, the question is, what does queer mean? So labels are a sensitive thing within the LGBTQ community. So queer is a term that is used for to identify someone as gay. So a man or a woman can identify as queer, and to them, that's how they're identifying. I identify as a lesbian, but lots of lesbians or lots of gay women will identify as gay. Some gay men will identify as gay or will identify as queer. Robert brought in a bunch of the other alphabet as he was standing up here. And so there are a lot of different ways to express your gender and your gender identity within our community. I have a question for Robert. Sure. I think it's very interesting around aging LGBTQ community and how we're dealing with that. Have you uncovered anything that would say, when we think about our parents, or if there's a relationship with someone close and we're having to move them into care, that is an LGBT-friendly environment, or how are we dealing with that? Because if we think about schools and we're saying, we have a number of people in schools who aren't comfortable coming out. Imagine, when most of your young adult life, you were hiding for fear of going to prison, being beaten, or anything like that. And now you're in a phase in your life where you're then becoming dependent on someone to help you. And how do we deal with that? Yes, I guess. Kevin's running.
Well, one of the things we talked about in the focus groups was about people, for one, older LGBT people, when they have to go into care, that they have to go back into the closet because of the fact that even with sensitivity training, that you can do sensitivity training and you can get the staff up to speed, but we have to remember that the other people living in those homes, they also grew up, the heterosexual people in those homes, male or female, they grew up in a time when homosexuality was illegal, when it was, immoral, when it was a psychiatric disorder. And so with living with those people, that's where they have the problem of having to go back into the closet. One of the things that's interesting about the letters of the alphabet is that with our project, it's called the LGBT End of Life Conversations. And the reason they didn't use the Q, they didn't use queer, is because other research, plus what we found, is that people who are over, say, 65, or especially over 70, they don't identify with the term queer because they just remember how it was a derogatory term. So often what we find is that older men will even more likely identify with the term homosexual, and then it's sort of the the middle generation, you know, people about 45 to 70, it seems to be around that. That's where you find gay men, talking about being a gay man. And then as you get younger, you'll find that you'll meet more, you know, queer men and queer members of the community. So it's just interesting how the transition of the terminology, but that's what we found even with our doing just the descriptive of who was in our study. Nobody actually identified as queer from the older people we studied.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Is there a way to ask online if they have questions? Are they posting them somewhere? Okay. Okay. Any other questions? I have a question. Yep.
Be running a bit.
Kevin, yeah, he's getting his exercise. I can cover this side of the room. How's that?
We have a lot of international students that are here at our university. I participated in one of the Are You Proud sessions, and one of the questions that was sort of brought, it wasn't really a question, it was more a comment, that was brought to the table was the concern for international students who are coming out here, but then having to return to their countries where they could be in danger. Do you know of any cases for refugees that might have come about for this specific reason, for people fearing for returning after coming out? Do you know of any cases like that? And if you can just maybe comment about how we can move conversations towards those kinds of things.
Sure. I don't personally know of any refugee claims on the basis of sexual identity. I have read about some. So I can't comment on that side. What I can say on the side of international students coming over, and then the cultural and subcultural and that sort of thing. What you can do is create a safe place. What you can do is help them understand what their rights are here in Canada, help them understand where they can go, depending on which country they're coming from, but tell them here within Canada where they can go and get help. And it's a personal decision, right? You know, how they want to protect their safety at home. The one thing that I will say about the LGBTQ community is it is a very networked, strong community, and there's always someone who knows someone, and they're always willing to help. So one of the things, you know, you'll hear comments about the strength of it. I travel all over the world doing what I do. I travel all over North America, and it is very easy for me to connect, you know, whether it's an email, a phone call, anything that says, hey, I need to understand this within the community, because, you know, to the term queer, even between Ontario and British Columbia, queer is used a lot differently, even within the millennial. So, you know, I want to understand what the nuances are regionally or within that organization, that sort of thing. So there's a strong connectivity. So I think what it is creating the strength and confidence here, and then helping them understand the personal choices, because that's what it is. It's a personal choice, and the risks and the protection that may or may not exist depending on where they are, and how they can solve for that. We can't make that decision. I would never say to someone it's always going to be safe here, there, wherever, because I don't know that. I don't know their personal situation. But what I can say is here within Canada, here's your rights, you know, here's how you can get help, and then reach out and find that help for them. I think it's important for people to understand that they are supported. And that's the other thing, you know, you may have people that come to you and say, or you know, you might think, I suspect that person's gay, but I'm not gonna ask, because what if they're not, right? All you can do is create an inclusive environment. So no, it's not up to you to out someone. No, it's not up to you to share someone's story if they share something with you, unless they've given you that permission to share their story. But what is your accountability is your behavior and what you do. And so that's doing things like asking about someone, how is your partner? You know, it's language we choose, right? You don't, like I said, people always assume because I'm a woman and I have children that I have a husband, right? So I'm constantly correcting, and sometimes I don't because it's just exhausting and I'm standing in the airport and who cares? And then, you know, I get on the plane and I kick myself because I'm like, really, I should have said, hey, because that was a teachable moment. And we try and take the best teachable moments we can and make something of it, but we're not perfect, we're human, we're not going to be able to do it. Sometimes it's easier just to pretend, right? Sometimes I omit things, lots of times, right? But what it is, it's your accountability in creating that environment. So when you start using inclusive language, you will see that people will start to speak a little bit more about what's important to them. And it's just about asking, and eventually people will start to tell. Any other questions? Yeah?
How many times have people asked you, so how did you make babies?
A number of times, yeah. They'll look at, they do but wait. Yeah, and so I'm happy to share that experience and share that story. Oh, sorry, the question was, how many times have people asked you how you make babies, being a woman and married to a woman? And so I'm happy to share that story. So again, I will preface my response by saying I'm someone who's very open, and I think everything's a teachable moment, and sometimes it's uncomfortable, and if I think it's uncomfortable, it'd be like, you know, that's a little uncomfortable, I need to think about it, and I'll come back, right, if it's in an opportunity I can. And then I share, I mean, I've been in environments where people don't know what LGBTQ is, never mind the Q and the 22TQ, right? They don't, so I'll spend time talking about that, and they'll be like, what do you mean someone can be bisexual, right? And so we have a very different conversation. What do you mean, you know, as a parent, well, what are you doing to your children, right? How do they interact on the, you know, when they go to school, what do they say? Because they can't draw a family tree. Well, they can, it's still the same. But it's not getting offended by what people are saying and saying, you know, but in future, that might be a little offensive because it's kind of like saying, you know, how do you have sex? Like I wouldn't ask that question because I don't know you well enough, right? If we were really good friends and we were talking about something else, that'd be okay, but I don't know you well enough to ask you about that. So yes, I get that all the time. More often than you would think. Yep.
Margaret Macmillan, the famous historian, is delivering the Massey Lectures in Victoria next week. Mm-hmm. And one of Margaret's claims is that the larger structural forces in history have something to do with historical and social change, but she argues that individuals have at least or more to do with that kind of social change. And the struggle for diversity and equity has been amazingly swift. And I'm wondering if, and there are icons that represent that, like mm-hmm. Katie Lang or Ellen DeGeneres, and they're popular cultural icons. And I'm wondering if how people feel here about icons, political or popular cultural, and rapid social change, and whether that's the route to creating a better world, and whether you rely on people like that, or mm-hmm. do you try and wrest the debates from them? Because in the world of popular culture, the debates might be rather tacky and not.
Right, right. Any thoughts in the room before I give you my thoughts? If you ask me a question, I'll always give you my thought. I would agree. I think that it'll take many individuals. The challenge with looking to the pop culture icons is their perceived life, so what we see from a media allowance perspective, doesn't necessarily align with, most people look at it and say, yeah, well, they're rich, they're famous, they can do what they want, right? They have all the money in the world. They don't align with, you know, I'm working 3 jobs, trying to figure out who I am. If anyone finds out, then I could lose my job, therefore I can't feed my family, those types of things. So, and we've seen a little bit, especially with the number of youth suicides of LGBTQ youth, in that you'll see leaders coming up in many different areas saying, you know, or people saying to identified leaders, we need to step up and say, you know, this is who I am. It's a piece of me. It doesn't define me, right? But people need to know that there are lots of normal roles in the world that are held by LGBTQ individuals, whether it be leaders, whether it be, you know, your teacher, your principal, your politicians. And so I would say there is an accountability, but then that's a personal thing, right? So some people, you know, have created a life which works for them, which is very separate. But you're seeing more and more with the suicides where people are stepping forward and saying, yeah, I mean, people knew I was out, I was kind of out, but now I'm coming out and saying, you know, I was very successful in what I did, because you're having so many people say, I don't think it gets better, right? If we want to use the campaign. Go ahead. Oh, James.
I hate these things. I've been trying to find a way to phrase this question. I guess, is there a way that you can summarize the individual evaluation about to cover or not to cover? And I'll try to add some context.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at determined to go into a very specific vocation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going into international mediation.
Right?
On behalf of Africa and the Middle East. I had a contribution in the showcase. It was anonymous. It was anonymous for a reason.
Yep.
So the places where I'm going, if it was known that I am transsexual, I am also a mother, there could be issues.
Yep. So here's what I would say to that. It's a personal safety for you, depending on where you are and what you're doing. I personally would never cover who I am. I have been in very sticky situations, which have been very uncomfortable just in the United States, for being openly out and gay recently, where, it's a bit touchy, right? I think that in order to make change, we need those who, I'll use the flag for us LGBTQ because we like our rainbow flag, that are waving the flag. They're on one, end of the spectrum. And then we have the change that happens all the way through, to the other end of the spectrum. You have to decide. What I did when I was waving my corporate flag, because it wasn't always easy, was to create my brand, my awareness, and let my capabilities and such stand, because that's what was important to me in my corporate life. And then, and by the way, I happen to be a mom, and I happen to be gay. Right? And that has nothing to do with my capabilities. But the route I chose was to say, I never denied it, but to say, these are my capabilities, this is who I am. And people, built that respect, that trust, that brand. And then, oh, by the way, these things just happen to be part of me. I didn't, hide it, but I didn't make a big deal of it. I think it's something you're really going to have to wrestle with to decide how you want to present that. Because sometimes covering can work for your benefit, and sometimes, we have to go through a side door in order to open the front door for everyone else, and so you have to decide personally what you want to do.
Because you made a salient point, in my opinion, that the amount of energy invested
Absolutely.
in it is huge,
Absolutely.
mammoth.
Oh,
Just
I can't
to
even,
bring it up to a level of normalcy.
Oh, yes.
And say, well, I could say this, but that might give this away.
Yeah.
And then all the dominoes would come down.
Correct. Am I willing to have that whole conversation? Oh, God, no. So I'm just not even going to mention the kids, right? Like, I'm just not, right? And it's quite amazing. I mean, trying being stuck on an airplane beside someone and they make a comment and you're like, oh my God, I can spend the next 6 hours talking about definitions, or I could read my book and put my earplugs in, right? So yes, it is. You come out, and I say that all the time. I come out every day. Every day. Try coming out, try walking around every day and saying, yeah, I'm heterosexual. Right? Yeah, that's what it means. Right? But every day I have to come out, right? And so it is sometimes exhausting, which is where, you're like, oh, and you don't, right? And then you missed a moment. Question here?
It was a comment back to Bernard about icons and the role that they play. In the late 1980s, early 1990, I was volunteering once a week in a support group dealing with people living with AIDS in Calgary. And it was a death sentence and a very much a stigma against them. And when Rock Hudson came out as gay, suddenly there was an ability for people to see that maybe regular people or icons or someone who they could relate to had AIDS, and it changed a lot of the attitude and reaction that people had to them. Certainly the group that I was dealing with who came and left felt that there was it was something of value. The same thing, conversations of people from rural Alberta thinking about or seeing people like Katie Lang, or watching television in which there were gay characters, gave them a sense of normalcy that they didn't experience or feel at all in their communities. So it has that significance, I think, and allows for change to occur.
I would agree. And I mean, even now you're seeing athletes coming out as athletes as opposed to retired athletes. So it's moving just that much closer to say, you know, I'm an athlete. Everything else shouldn't matter, right? It shouldn't matter if you draft me or not, right? I'm #1 draft pick. So I would, yeah. Any other questions? I know we're at time, I think, which might be, are we at time? Robert? I beat you.
Just by talking about who we're talking to and who's involved. And one of the things I want to do with my own research is that I have this sense that the literature out there it's been impacted by the vocal people, and like you talked about, the spectrum. And in my own research, I want to go and find out. I want to go find people, and I want to say, okay, you're here, you're a member of this organization, or you're at this Pride Parade. And I said, can you find me someone that you know that doesn't come to the meetings, that doesn't come to the parades? I want to find out, you know, the broader community of LGBT. And I think that's an interesting thing to study. I think that's going to, you know, bring some really unique perspectives.
I just have a question around recognizing diversity within our own community, and how do we broach that? Because there's a lot of internal misunderstanding. I experienced it when I was trying to further the cause for gay marriage with my husband, and we were told we were too gay by the gay organization, the legal team that was trying to put it forward, that we were too gay to actually be the face of this cause.
Yes, because then you'd be on a soapbox as opposed to making change. Yes, yes.
So how do we look at ourselves and expect the community to create this safe space for diversity when we internally look at each other with question and at times condemnation?
Mm-hmm. I like to call it an unconscious bias, and we all have it, right? And that's informed partly through our diversity, right? Like where we grew up, how we grew up, our education, where we've worked, who we see, who we hang out with, all those types of things. So I think it starts with, and again, I'll call it inclusive leadership, but it starts with a self-awareness and a pause, right? Because even within our own community, there is, and you touched on it, right? There is isms and discrimination, right? You're too butch, you're too gay, right? You can't make up your mind, you know, all those types of things, right? Pick a pronoun, don't pick a pronoun, what's going on? And you know, I would be surmising to say, I think people are trying to, you know, take a stand and advocate for who looks like me, because then I'm like, we have a group like me, as opposed to always just being that different person. And change continues to evolve, right? So we talked about lesbian and gay, and then we started having more conversations about bisexual, and then we started having conversations about two-spirited, and then we started having conversations about transgender, right? And so we keep moving and pushing the boundaries of what comfort level people have. And I think in doing that, we forget, even within our own community, that we are changing, we are evolving, and we need to recognize that and move with it. And so I think it starts with your language, your reaction, and even just pushing back, like, that's actually not okay, right? What defines too gay, right? Like, that's what I say to people, they say, you don't look gay. Well, okay, you don't look heterosexual then. Like, what do you want me to say? And so, like, but see, your immediate reaction is a defensive one, right? Well, what do you mean I don't look gay? Right? So I think that's what it is. I think we've evolved to a place where we need to step back and say, I need to make the change through how I am responding, the language I am using to evoke change further. Any other questions, comments? Yep.
Got one here.
I have one. So just because I've been the graphic artist today, there's a theme that's gone through the whole day, and it started with Bill, and it was capturing the stories and the storytelling. So we as a university have, you know, the systemic big stuff that we can do, but there's also this little place, and I really wanted out of today to find something that we can do next, right? Like I really wanted to feel like I left here like with an action, and I feel like storytelling was a theme that every single person who talked had a story, and we wish some stories were documented, right? And it's we could do that, and so I'd like to think that maybe that's what comes out of today. If I can pick something, is we've got beautiful vignettes and we've got stories to share, and maybe that could be a very powerful piece for each of us.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's about sharing the story, because regardless of everything else, at the end of the day, we're human, right? And we want to know, and we want to hear, and we want to grow, and we do that through talking, right? Whether we're talking online or talking in person. Any questions online? They're there, but they're quiet. They're just watching us. Anything else? Yeah? Yep. Hold on, we'll just get you a microphone so they can hear you online.
I write a blog on diversity, and what I do is what you said. I tell stories about people that I know, and I also tell story about people about events that I go to that I know that are helping people in the community to be more inclusive. So if anybody has a story, I would really love to tell about that story on
That's
my
great.
blog. And yeah, so it's what I do.
So
that's
how
what
do
I can-
people get a hold of you, Sylvia?
Sorry?
How do they get a hold of you if they want to send you a story?
I search for them, I ambush them,
So if we want to come to you so that you don't have to ambush us.
Yes.
Do you have a website or a?
Yes, I do have a website, and I was going to talk to the president of RRU to see if he could please be my blog, because I would really love to interview him.
You've got she's like one table over. I have one of the 5 presidents of a university who happens to be out.
But
Yes.
sometimes people don't want to.
And that's fair.
Yeah, and that's fair.
Yeah, we have to respect that.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it's called Inclusive in the Community, but if you put my name, I have a card. I can give you a card.
Great.
SylviaMange.com.
Great. Thanks. That's awesome. We need to tell the stories every way we can. One of the things I'll often get in some of the workshops and inclusive labs that I run is, how do I get rid of my unconscious bias, right? Because we all have them. And so some of the things that have come up in those discussions and solutions that people have come up with is, to ask questions. Figure out a way, so this again depends on the size of your organization and the access to information, but we all have times of the year, like most of religious holidays, Pride Month kicks off in Manitoba and then runs all the way around the country. Those types of things. So I know at Deloitte, what we do is we have an internal intranet. I'm assuming you guys have a faculty specific or something like that. And we have a calendar that recognizes all that. And so every day when you log on, just on the top, it tells you what that is. And then you click on that link and it gives you a little bit of information about it. So if someone mentions it, you don't feel as silly because you're like, I've never heard that term, or I don't know what it is, or what does it mean to celebrate that? So a lot of organizations are starting to do that so that there's an awareness around what's happening or what's significant in someone's life. Another solution that's been brought up is, being sensitive to how we celebrate success. So it's not always a drink at the pub down the street. It could be coffee in the morning. It could be something at lunch. It could be, discussion. It could be bring everyone together once a quarter and, celebrate something so that we're not being specific about, I'm walking around with the microphone. I'm not being specific about something. It's about building an awareness and then celebrating that success. And the other is around thinking about how you position things. And so we had one leadership team who found a buddy. So if you're closely working together or who would say at the end of a meeting or something, you could have probably used this word instead of that word, and it would have meant something very different because, you know, you're in the moment, you're speaking, you're a little bit nervous, or you're on an agenda, you need a point made, you move forward. And then this helps you become aware of some of the differences that you have and some of the things, the unconscious biases that come out that you don't even recognize yourself until someone points it out, but it's a safe relationship. You know, it's never your boss or anything like that because then you feel like you're being performance managed. But it sort of creates that awareness. It's about awareness. Those are some of the things that came up of a recent session. Yep. Well done. Kevin will bring you.
Thank you. So you said that what you do, you write programs for inclusion and diversity in organizations, right?
Correct. I will build strategies, help them,
Okay.
and I have fundamentally believe that inclusion is part of your existing strategic objectives and framework as the organization, whether you're a 2-person shop or a 200,000 person shop. It's not a strategy that should stand on its own because by virtue it's not inclusive.
Okay. So when you go to other countries, and they ask you, do they ask you programs like this one that you're doing now?
Yes. So typically how it will manifest itself, it's not the government calling me in. It's a global organization who has a substantial presence in a different country. So for example, they may bring in a bunch of expats who happen to be women, working in an environment where traditionally women aren't working, or they're wearing their headdress or whatever it is. And so how do you drop in a bunch of people that you keep the values of the organization, you keep the values of the individual, and you respect the culture of the country in which you're in.
Yeah,
so working through stuff like that.
Yeah, because I was going to say, one size cannot fit all, right?
Correct. You
Yeah,
have
so-
to, yeah, it's like faceted against a number of things. But those are the types of things. So how do we do that? Or we're thinking of moving in to this environment, or one that I've spent a lot of time right now is in mining and oil and gas. So, big surge, very much from an industry perspective, stereotypical in being male dominant, that sort of thing. So their primary focus is on the land, so their Aboriginal programs based on the land that they're in, where it has a treaty, not those types of things. And then the second, and how do we help support the community through hiring, and then gender equality. So how do we change the perception that, oil and gas and mining isn't being at the bottom of a hole? There's a whole bunch of stuff, and we need more women and minorities to come into that. And so how do we work with universities and those types of things to recruit in order to get people in? So those are some of the things as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We're out. Done?
So, in the essence of time here, thank you, Jackie, for facilitating that for us. We can continue the conversations as soon as we do our concluding wrap-up bit here, and I'm sure the conversations will carry on afterwards. But at this point, I'd like to bring up Matt Hinds to discuss the Global Advancement and Diversity Fund future.
I really just wanted, on behalf of the Diversity Action Committee, to first of all thank all of you, those of you who are here and those of you who are online, and all of those who have helped organize this event, for your participation. I wanted to point out again that the entire event has been made possible by the Alan Cahoon Global Advancement and Diversity Fund, and it's not a one-time event. So through this fund, every other year, there will be an opportunity for individuals or groups to pursue financial support for a dialogue-based initiative or project in any area of diversity. And more information about how to apply for these funds will be released sometime later. Thank you all. And
I would now like to bring up Elder William White of the, oh boy, how do you pronounce that? I never get it right. Snanaimo? Yes. Coast Salish peoples to do the closing for us. I have an announcement here I also need to make. Bill White has actually donated his honorarium fees back to the RRU Students Committee, and they will be purchasing supplies for the RRU Student Food Bank with it.
I have to tell you, my experience with Colin Eaton, white people, is they really like to talk a lot and they ask a lot of questions. I'm a little bit disappointed. No, I'm kidding. This is very tough. Granted, it is very tough. I do want to mention this was an amazing morning in terms of just to be able to feel safe and to talk about change, to talk about inclusion, to talk about, in the course of time, I would hope you're going to talk about what do we need to do. I did notice, I did ask the MC, I said, where are the students? And I said, where are the men? With great respect to the men who are here. And so I think that this period will be one of transformation and change, and indeed the importance of looking at what is diversity. What are the things that we might think about? I need to talk a bit first. I know that Native Student Union at the University of Victoria, it was dysfunctional in the early 80s. And a small group of us came together, led by our good friend Kim Raquel McCludacy. I usually tell her, I said, you've heard this. I said to Kim, very prominent political family, I said to her, you could try and be a little less impressive today. It's so much easier on those of us who are not. And in their language, waha, which means please, waha, Kim, please. I think that I want to do a couple of recommendations and then close with a prayer. But I do need you to think about some questions, and perhaps even if you went online yourselves and posted questions, it'd be important to look at some of those questions, particularly around application. The reason I mentioned the UVic, because UVic, like many other universities, was always very conservative. There was no First Nation studies, no Native studies, no history of Indian-white relations, no this. It was British. In the Department of History, it was British history. I'm exaggerating, 300 courses on British history. Oh, with great respect and great kindness, Dr. Ken Coates embraced a number of us students, and we developed three new courses, one on the Gitxsan Wet'suwet'en, another on tribes of Vancouver Island, and another on Indian-white relations in Canada. It broke through that barrier. Because of my work with one of the largest tribes on the island, interviewing elders around traditions and values, particularly to counter the darkness associated with HIV and AIDS. We did not talk about HIV and AIDS. We did not talk about sexuality, but we talked about what are the traditions, how do we take care of each other, what are the rules around being good and being kind, how do we help one another, what are the songs associated to do this, what are the ceremonies associated with taking care of one another. As a result of that work, a number of very prominent gay organizations in Victoria and Vancouver invited me to come and speak. And I said to these guys, you really have to, and that's why I appreciated the introductory remarks and yours as well. I said, you guys really have to understand that the gay community historically has been very ageist. You are only worthwhile if you are up to 24 or 25. And this is very problematic. I said I went to Gay Men's Health Summit in Vancouver several years ago, and it was my first time going to a meeting apart from the club scene in the 70s. So I was responsible for opening up the conference. And I made everyone, and I'm surprised I didn't get you guys to do that. Because the gay community, first and foremost, is one of joy. It is one of excitement. It is one of finding, creating brothers, creating sisters, creating friends, moving with a powerful community, being accepted for the first time in your lives, rather than being rejected in your respective communities. It was about dancing and clubbing and all of that. Absolute joy and belonging. And I made everybody at the very beginning, I said, I need you to stand up. I won't get you to do that, but you just imagine. I said, I need you to stand up and I need you to go. Some of you will remember this, hopefully many. I said, I need you to go toot toot, beep beep. Toot toot, beep beep. Which of course is Donna Summer. And when that song started, everybody came onto the dance floor. Everybody knew it was exciting, it was ours. People belonged, and friends came together. The dance floor was, that's what we should have made you guys do. I'm kidding. And I said, you have to remember first and foremost that this was and is the community. We can't concentrate on the great darkness of HIV and AIDS. It is there, but it is not where we came from. It is not where we came from, and it's not where we're going to go either. I said to them, I'm talking to you as if you were my relatives. And I said, you know, there are some older men who were responsible for these organizations in the 60s and the 70s. As a young administrator, you haven't asked them to present. Why aren't you getting their stories? Why aren't you finding out what their experience has been? Why aren't you finding out what their joy, what their excitement was, what their relationships were? Why aren't you finding out how they protected each other so this new group of young men can learn that? Why aren't they talking together? And I said, you need to start that now. Not next year, not 2 years from now. Because I managed to speak to two older men, as if I wasn't old. Two older men who were responsible for setting up those organizations in Vancouver. And I thought, oh my God, this is stunning. I want to mention, in terms of what you might consider at Royal Roads, from our own experience at UVic in the history department with the Native Student Union, you know, we developed those new courses. And it would be amazing for professionals who are going to leave this organization to learn about the disco period, to learn about the history of being driven from the rural areas to the city, to learn how they developed new families, and yes, to learn what that great darkness meant, but also to recognize this leader, this leader, this leader, this leader, this leader. Because there are so many things to learn about who we are. I've had one of my teachers in the 90s, whilst I was still a student, said to me, you see and hear everything for a purpose, she said to me. And she said, when you walk this path of spirituality, you can never be a politician again. And it wasn't a dialogue. She was just telling me what was to be true, hey? And that was because in terms of spirituality, which is a phenomena, I also said to the young leaders, I said, you have to develop a sense of spirituality amongst the gay community. You have to understand what balance is. You have to understand what spirit is and learn from our people. You have to stop rejecting our people because they're not blue-eyed and blonde-haired. I didn't go on and on. there is a sense of a wonderful sense of spirituality that's beginning to develop within the gay community, the LGBT, whatever community, that I think is important. Finally, I say this for my own benefit. You know, none of my teachers were gay. None of the old people that I worked with talked about sexuality. They talked about balance. They talked about ritual. They talked about ceremony. They talked about belonging. They talked about helping one another. They talked about being clean. They talked about being strong. How do we do that? Is what they did. My teacher also said to me, if someone comes to you and wants your help, and they ask you for advice, if you don't give that advice, 10 more will come. And I'm on my 4th student right now, who is just the most amazing young man. I hesitated when he came. He was sent to me. And I said, well, why did you come? What do you want to learn? Because I learned that when you're with white people, you can ask them to define. What is your objective? How do you plan to achieve that objective? Describe why you came here. My standard line is, you're a white person, you're an academic, you have a PhD, you can do this. I'll wait. Finally, I said to him, I am a traditional person. I am a traditional leader. I have been raised in a traditional way. I love the songs, I love the ceremonies, I love the sacred, I love balance. I see these things, this world. I know these things, this world, because I am gay. If that makes you afraid, do not come close to me. Leave, I said to another student. Leave and don't come back. I don't want to see you. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want you coming to my apartment because you are afraid of these things. You are afraid. Look at you. You're just about quivering. I exaggerated. Dear ones, it would be, I need to close. It would be wonderful for the profession, the students who come out of here to take, because I understand from my time at the university that Colin Eaton, white people, which is not pejorative, Colin Eaton value only the written word. And if they are tested, then they will learn, they will dedicate their time to it. It'd be wonderful to develop new courses that help students come out in a professional way, to learn the history of the cultural other, if you will. That would be an amazing, significant development. If I could get you to stand now. If I could, I want to thank the President for his opening, thank my dear friend and relative, Asma, for the invitation, and the amazing chairman. I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to thank all of you for being open. Thank all of you for listening intently. I won't harass you for not asking questions, because prayers shouldn't be loaded like that. I think, you know, this is about creating, this is an amazing time to create change, an amazing time to talk about diversity. There are significant changes now than 30 years ago, than 20 years ago. In a spiritual sense, I'm sorry, I wanted to pick up on a point that you made. When I started this path of spirituality very intently about 15, 20 years ago, the man I was with was bi. And I said to him, classically, I don't care. I don't care if you were bi. I don't believe that. You choose now. If you're not going to choose, I will choose for you. I think when you're gay, you can be kind of arrogant like that. And because I was on a spiritual path, the Creator and the ancestors made me pay from 1990 until only recently I paid karma for that. So it's a big thing about spirituality and tradition in the walk. Okay, too much time. Okay, dear ones, thank you for coming. Please close your eyes and go into that place which for you is a place of real comfort, a place of safety, a place where you belong, a place where health, a place where songs begin, a place where prayers begin, a place where we all know that we belong, a place where the natural and supernatural worlds flow through, a place when the gentle winds blow, it reminds us that we belong. A place when the winds blow, the gentle winds blow, we know it is the Creator and the old people's voices. The old people's voices are those who traveled before us, who know how to sing, who know how to pray. We ask the Creator for great blessings and for each of you as you've come here. We ask the Creator and the ancestors to bring real blessings to your families, your children, your grandchildren, your mates, your friends, especially for those of us who have relatives who are not well today. Thank you, dear ones. Have a great day. Have a great week. The old man that I lived, one of my teachers Agnes Pierre, the great Agnes Pierre, and our mom and our Auntie Tilly would say, "Oh, honey, we love you."
Well, I have nothing to add to that except thank you everybody for coming and participating, and thank you everybody online for your participation as well. I'm sure there's going to be conversations still happening. Sign up outside if you want to buy a t-shirt or join the RRU Proud. That's just on the table just outside the doors there. Thank you.